This is the story of Beauty and the Beast. Once upon a time, in a faraway kingdom, there lived a wealthy merchant with his 3 daughters. The youngest daughter was the most beautiful and kind, so she was called Beauty. Despite her beauty, Beauty was modest and loved spending her time reading books and helping those in need. One day, the merchant lost all his fortune in a shipwreck and had to move with his daughters to a small house in the countryside. The 2 older sisters, who were vain and selfish, lamented the loss of their wealth, while Beauty quickly adapted to the simple new life. One day, the merchant received news that one of his ships, which he believed to have been lost, had arrived at the port. Hopeful, he immediately set off for the city, promising to bring gifts for his daughters. The older sisters asked for expensive clothes and jewelry, but Beauty asked only for a rose. When the merchant arrived in the city, he discovered that the ship was empty. Feeling desolate, he began his journey back home. On the way, a storm forced him to seek shelter in a mysterious castle. The castle seemed deserted, but he found a table full of food and a comfortable room to spend the night. The next morning, as he was leaving, he saw a beautiful garden full of roses. Remembering Beauty's request, he picked a rose to take to his daughter. At that moment, a terrible creature, half man, half beast, appeared and accused the merchant of theft. The beast demanded that he pay with his life, unless one of his daughters came in his place. With a heavy heart, the merchant returned home and told his daughters what had happened. Beauty, feeling responsible for the situation, decided to go to the castle in her father's place. Upon arriving at the castle, Beauty was treated with great courtesy by the beast. Although his appearance was frightening, he proved to be kind and considerate. Over time, Beauty began to see beyond the beast's appearance and appreciated his qualities. She learned that the beast was actually a prince who had been cursed by a witch, and that only true love could break the spell. One night, Beauty had a dream in which she saw her father gravely ill. Concerned, she asked the beast for permission to visit him. The beast, though reluctant, allowed her to go, but on the condition that she would return in a week. Beauty promised to come back. Back at her father's house, Beauty cared for him until he regained his health. Her sisters, jealous of her happiness, tried to delay her return to the castle, but Beauty kept her promise. However, upon arriving, she found the beast dying of sorrow, believing that Beauty would not return. Desperate, Beauty confessed her love for the beast, and at that moment, the spell was broken. The beast transformed back into the prince and asked Beauty to marry him. They were married and lived happily ever after, ruling the kingdom with kindness and wisdom. And so, Beauty's true love not only saved the prince but also brought eternal happiness to them both. This is the story of Rapunzel. Once upon a time, a pregnant queen fell gravely ill. Driven by their love for the queen, The people developed a tonic from a unique flower that sprouted from a drop of sunlight. The remedy restored the queen's health, but it also granted magical healing powers to the baby in her womb. Sometime later, the queen gave birth to a beautiful princess, who was named Rapunzel. However, shortly after the girl was born, a jealous old witch named Godhel kidnapped her. She wanted to use the girl's healing powers to stay eternally young. Godhel imprisoned Rapunzel in a tower in the middle of a distant forest and raised her as if she were her own daughter. The girl grew up, and her hair became so long that it took her several hours to comb it. It was in Rapunzel's hair that her healing power resided. Godhel convinced the girl that the outside world was full of dangers and ill-intentioned people. Naive, Rapunzel believed her words and stayed in the tower. To pass the time, she spent her days drawing on the walls of her room. Every year on her birthday, Rapunzel observed from her window a festival of lights in the sky that took place in the neighboring kingdom, unaware that it was a celebration in her honor. She dreamed of participating in the festival. On her 18th birthday, she finally gathered the courage to ask Godhel to take her there. However, Godhel vehemently refused and ordered Rapunzel never to think of leaving the tower again. Coincidentally, on the same day, a handsome and charismatic thief named Flynn Rider broke into Rapunzel's tower and stole her jewels and crown. Rapunzel captured him, confiscated his backpack, and held him hostage, promising to return the backpack if he took her to the festival. He agreed. To distract Godhel and escape from the tower, Rapunzel asked her for a special paint made from shells, which would take 3 days to obtain. As soon as Godhel left the tower in search of the paint, Rapunzel let her beautiful long hair down from the window, and she and Flynn descended using it. On their journey, they faced many challenges and learned to respect and trust each other. Rapunzel then revealed to Flynn the story of her magical hair. When Godhel returned to the tower, she noticed Rapunzel's absence and went out to look for her. When she found her on the way to the festival, Rapunzel refused to return. Godhel claimed that Flynn was only with her for the jewels and hired 2 thugs to kill him. At the festival, Rapunzel and Flynn grew closer and fell in love. Flynn took her for a boat ride, and she finally saw the floating lights in the sky. Satisfied, Rapunzel returned the backpack to Flynn. Soon after, Flynn fled from the 2 thugs who were chasing him, leaving Rapunzel alone to protect her. Godhel then kidnapped Rapunzel and locked her in the tower. Desolate at Flynn's supposed abandonment, Rapunzel agreed never to leave the tower again. However, upon examining a flag she had brought from the festival, she remembered her true identity as the kidnapped princess and confronted Godhel. Meanwhile, Flynn returned to the tower to rescue Rapunzel but was severely wounded by Godhel. In an act of love and sacrifice, Flynn cut Rapunzel's magical hair, nullifying its powers and causing Godhell to age rapidly and disintegrate before hitting the ground. Upon seeing her beloved injured, Rapunzel shed a tear that miraculously restored her health. He led her back to the kingdom, where she regained her place as princess. The entire kingdom rejoiced at the return of the princess. And Rapunzel and Flynn got married and lived happily ever after. This is the story of Snow White. Once upon a time, there was a distant kingdom where a king reigned alongside his charming wife. The queen wished to have a daughter with skin as fair as snow, lips as red as crimson, and hair as dark as night. Her wish was granted when she gave birth to a daughter, who was named Snow White. However, the joy was ephemeral, as the queen died shortly after giving birth, leaving the king in deep grief. A few years later, the king remarried a woman of great beauty, but with a wicked and vain soul. She was a sorceress and has a magic mirror that never lies. Every day, the evil queen asked the mirror, "Mirror, my mirror, is there anyone more beautiful than me?" And the mirror replied, "It doesn't exist. You are the most beautiful." However, when Snow White grew up, the mirror began to say that she was the most beautiful of all. Jealous and furious, the evil queen plotted to kill the young princess. She hired a hunter to take the young girl to the forest and take her heart. However, moved by Snow White's purity, the huntsman allowed her to escape, instructing her to flee and never return to the castle. And in place of Snow White's heart, he presented the queen with the heart of a bear, pretending to be the girl's. Meanwhile, the princess found shelter in a small house inhabited by 7 mining dwarves. However, when consulting the mirror again, the queen discovered that Snow White was still alive and tried to kill her with poison apples. To do this, she disguises herself as an old apple seller. One day, when the dwarves had gone to work, the princess bought an apple from the witch and fell into a deep sleep. The spell could only be broken if the young princess received a kiss from true love. When the dwarfs returned home and found Snow White sleeping as if dead, they were very sad and held her funeral in the forest. A young prince was passing by at that moment and saw the beautiful princess in the coffin and fell in love with her. He woke her up with a kiss of love, and everyone was very happy. After that, Snow White and the prince got married, and the evil queen was imprisoned in the castle until the end of her days. This is the story of Sleeping Beauty. Once upon a time, there was a king and queen who longed for an heir. However, despite their fervent wishes, they never had a baby. Much later, the couple's desire was finally fulfilled, and they had a beautiful daughter. To celebrate her birth, they organized a grand feast and invited fairy godmothers to bless the child. However, due to the king's shortage of golden plates, only 12 fairies were invited. They bestowed special gifts upon the newborn, such as kindness, beauty, and wisdom. After 11 fairies had bestowed their blessings, a resentful fairy who hadn't been invited stormed into the hall. In her anger, she uttered a dark prophecy. "When the princess turns 15, she shall be wounded by a spinning wheel and fall into death." She then quickly exited the hall, leaving everyone shocked. Fortunately, the 12th fairy had not yet bestowed her gift upon the child. She couldn't undo the evil spell, but she could make it slightly less terrible. She said, "The princess shall not die, but shall sleep for 100 years until awakened by a true love's kiss from a brave prince." Determined to avert such a fate, the king ordered the removal of all spinning wheels from the kingdom. Meanwhile, the fairies' blessings came true, and the princess grew in virtue, beauty, and intelligence, becoming beloved by all. On the eve of the princess's 15th birthday, the king and queen had to go on a journey, leaving the princess alone. Bored, she explored the castle until she found an old tower. There, she discovered a spinning wheel, and her curiosity led her to touch it. In that moment, she pricked her finger, and the spell was fulfilled. When the king returned and found the princess sleeping deeply, he carried her to the most beautiful room and laid her on a bed. The king ordered that no one disturb her. Then he asked the 12th good fairy to put everyone in the palace to sleep as well, and they wouldn't awaken until the princess did. In the meantime, a great thorn fence grew around the palace, so that only the towers were visible. 100 years passed, and a young prince from another kingdom traveled through the land and heard the story of Sleeping Beauty. At that time, no one had been able to enter the castle. But the prince was not afraid and decided to try. As he approached the castle, a miracle happened. The thorn fence turned into beautiful flowers, and the trees and bushes moved aside automatically. Upon entering the castle, he found all its inhabitants asleep. Finally, he reached the tower room where the princess was sleeping. Although 100 years had passed, she still looked young. She was the most beautiful girl the prince had ever seen, and he couldn't stop looking at her. Captivated by her beauty, he fell in love with her and kissed her. As he kissed her, the evil fairy's spell was finally broken, and everyone in the castle awoke. The princess, awake, laughed joyfully and said, "Are you my prince? I have waited so long for you." Then the prince and princess found happiness together, sealing their love in a joyful wedding ceremony, and lived happily ever after. This is the story of the Little Mermaid. Once upon a time, there was a magical underwater kingdom ruled by King Triton. He had 6 mermaid daughters. The youngest daughter, named Ariel, dreamed of exploring the human world. She had a beautiful voice and loved to sing. Every day, she swam through the reefs and enchanted everyone with her music. One day, while swimming near the surface, Ariel saw a ship passing by. Fascinated by the lights, sails, and music coming from it, she cautiously approached. It was then that the Little Mermaid saw the handsome Prince Eric. He had dark hair and charming eyes. She was immediately very attracted to him. Suddenly, a terrible storm began. The waves grew very high, and the ship couldn't withstand it. It broke in two and sank into the sea. The Little Mermaid knew that humans can't survive underwater. So she quickly searched for the prince and brought him to a beach. She sang until he woke up. As soon as he awoke, the prince looked at Ariel and heard her say, "One day I'll be part of your world." When she realized that the prince was waking up, Ariel quickly swam away and dove to the bottom of the sea. A servant found the prince and took him back to the palace. Back at the bottom of the sea, the Little Mermaid decided to ask Ursula, a treacherous witch, for help to enter the human world. "I can transform your fish tail into legs for 3 days, but in return, you'll have to give me your voice," said the witch. "However, if the prince doesn't fall in love with you within 3 days, you'll become a mermaid again and will be my slave forever." The mermaid accepted, and the witch gave her a magic potion. Ariel swam to the beach and drank the potion. Prince Eric, who was walking his dog on the beach, saw Ariel and ran to her, asking if they had met before. But since Ariel was without a voice, she couldn't say anything and communicated only through gestures and facial expressions. The prince felt that Ariel was the mermaid who had saved him from the shipwreck and took her to live with him at the palace. As the days passed, the two fell more and more in love with each other. Meanwhile, Ursula, with her magic ball, saw that Ariel and the prince were falling more and more in love. Determined to thwart Ariel's plans, she disguised herself as a beautiful young woman named Vanessa and used Ariel's voice, which was stored in a magic necklace, to hypnotize Prince Eric. When the prince heard Vanessa sing, he was enchanted and decided to marry her the same day in a grand celebration on a ship. Realizing Ursula's malevolent plan, Ariel gathered her sea friends to stop the wedding. Ariel's friends leapt onto the ship. Amidst the confusion, the witch's necklace fell to the ground and Ariel recovered her voice. Seeing Eric, Ariel called out to him, and he realized she was the mermaid who had saved him from the shipwreck. When Ariel and Eric were about to kiss, Ursula transformed into a sea monster and dragged Ariel to the bottom of the sea. Night fell, and Ariel's legs turned back into a mermaid tail. King Triton, worried about Ariel's absence, went to Ursula to ask her to see in her magic ball where Ariel was. Then Ursula told him about the deal she had made with his daughter. The king proposed to the witch to release Ariel in exchange for his kingly powers. She agreed and shouted, "Now I rule the ocean." Seeing this, the brave prince drove the ship toward Ursula and struck her. She She then sank into the sea, and the king regained his powers. King Triton, realizing that Eric and Ariel loved each other very much, transformed Ariel's tail into legs again so she could live with Prince Eric in the human world. Then the two got married and lived happily ever after. This is the story of Cinderella. Once upon a time, there was a distant kingdom where a beautiful young woman known as Cinderella lived. After her mother's death, her father remarried. Sometime later, he also died. And so Cinderella was left in the care of her stepmother and her two daughters. Cinderella's stepsisters were very jealous of her and made her do all the household chores. One day, the royal palace announced a grand ball, where the prince would choose a young woman to be his wife. All the maidens in the kingdom were invited. Cinderella looked forward to the opportunity to participate and even made a beautiful dress. However, her stepmother banned her from going to the ball and destroyed her dress, leaving her devastated. While Cinderella was crying desperately in the garden, a fairy godmother appeared, ready to help her. With her magic wand, the fairy godmother transformed a pumpkin into a carriage, mice into horses, and Cinderella's costumes into a stunning dress. She also presented her with glass slippers, warning her that the magic would cease at midnight, therefore, she should return before that time. Filled with joy and hope, Cinderella went to the ball and immediately captured the prince's attention with her grace and beauty. They danced until the late hours of the night. However, as midnight approached, Cinderella was forced to leave hastily. While quickly descending the stairs of the prince's palace, Cinderella accidentally dropped a glass slipper. The prince, determined to find the mysterious owner of the shoe, traveled throughout the kingdom, testing the shoes on all the young women. Finally, he arrived at Cinderella's house. His stepsisters tried in vain to put it on, but only Cinderella's foot fit perfectly into the shoe. Thus, the prince recognized that she was his ballmate and took her with him to the castle. So Cinderella left the days of servitude behind and found her true happiness with the prince, whom she loved. They celebrated their love with a wedding and lived happily ever after. Remember to like the video and subscribe to our channel to watch the next videos. Bye.